Hello and welcome to a very special program. I'm at the Srinagar Air Force Base. It was on the 26th of February last year, exactly a year back, that the Indian Air Force launched its attacks on the Jaish-e-Mohammad terror training camp in Balakot in Pakistan. Many of the aircraft which were deployed on the mission were also deployed from this area. And there were several aircraft which were involved. There were Mirage 2000s, which were responsible for the release of Israeli-made spy satellite-guided weaponry. There were Sukhoi 30s like the aircraft behind me, which were involved in other missions. But a year later, the Indian Air Force has one message to give. That if there's another requirement such as that during Balakot, they are ready and they will hit these targets hard. On this very special program, an interview with the Chief of Air Staff. A year back, the Indian Air Force struck the Jaish-e-Mohammad terror training facility in Balakot in Pakistan. This was the first time since the 1971 war that the Indian Air Force had struck targets deep inside Pakistan. Joining us now to look not just at Balakot, but I think the lessons learned, the road forward, is the Chief of Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal Bhadauria. Thank you, sir, very much for being with us. But I must ask you, we've got a MiG-21 behind us. It's an aircraft which you would have had a great deal of experience in growing up. This is what the Indian Air Force is all about in a sense, and Abhinandan flew this aircraft as well on the 27th, the day after. What does this aircraft mean to you, sir?
This aircraft means a lot. I'm glad you asked this question first because when I started my operational training, I flew this aircraft first.
Right, and you flew it today. I mean,
and I've flown it today, and nothing could be better.
Right.
This aircraft has a lot of place in my operational history and the way I look at the entire MiG-21 fleet. And why I'm here with 51 is because of this aircraft and because what they did in Balakot on the 27th,
right,
when the Pakistani Air Force responded. In spite of the technology gap and in spite of the clear gap in BVR capability.
Yeah.
And this really represents the spirit of Air Force.
And I think this is an important point, that the MiG-21 Bison, which we deployed on that day on the 27th, is a fairly advanced aircraft. It may not be state of the art, but in terms of the sensors, the integration, even some of the weapons, it's not the MiG-21 we used to fly. It's considerably different.
Yeah, of course. It was a modernized version. It had a good radar. It had a BVR, a decent BVR. But in terms of comparison with the adversary at that time, the BVR that the F-16s, the AMRAAMs that they used were much more capable. So while the sensors were good, it is tremendous training that this squadron has undergone, and the capability to engage any fighter package. That is what held the day that day, and they were able to engage.
Yeah, and you fight with what you have. It's as simple as that.
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
And so the spirit of these pilots, the MiG-21 pilots who deployed that day, we've spoken about Abhinandan in the past, but there were others as well. And they were in the fight the moment they got the order, knowing fully well that they were engaging possibly F-16s, a superior aircraft, but they fought with what they had.
Not possibly. It was sure that the F-16s are there,
right,
because by then the AD network had picked up. We had the electronic signatures, everything, and there was no hesitation. These pilots took off. They were vectored. They were engaged. Of course, the other air defense aircraft were also there. The Su-30s were there. The MiG-29s were used. The Mirage 2000s were used, and it is the spirit and the attitude that matters. Yeah. And that's why in particular I chose, like I mentioned, to be with 51. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Balakot. 1 year down the road, we carried out the attacks using spy satellite guided bombs. We did hit the terror training target. I mean, I've had the privilege of actually seeing some of those images. But if there's anything that you would have liked to have seen differently, or something you would have liked to have changed, what would that be?
See, in terms of undertaking that kind of target, I think the choice of weapon and the choice of the kind of mission flown was very well done. We achieved it with great secrecy, because when you undertake such a mission, secrecy is important. And in spite of their adversary air force being on full air defense alert, they were nowhere close to our strike package. So the mission planning, the execution, it went through beautifully, and the target was struck. What we would do differently, of course, what is not known is the other scenario, the weather conditions, the other challenging conditions that were encountered, and the fact that we were utilizing our strike aircraft from well dispersed airfields, far away, used air-to-air refueling. So, in terms of how we would use it differently, of course, looking at battle damage assessment, we need to back up our ability to do a battle damage assessment. In terms of taking on targets like this, it becomes even more important because of the information war that starts after that.
Yeah.
And that is one takeaway for this for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, that's gone on back and forth. And I know you don't really want to get into that, but that information part of it, I mean, do you sometimes feel maybe not let down, but that, more could have been established had there been, for example, video which we released? We were unable to launch the Crystal Maze weapons on that particular day. So going forward, do you believe that that video evidence or photographic evidence, if it comes into the public domain, then it creates a deeper impact? Or do you believe the impact has still been made sufficiently?
There are two aspects. Firstly, we had a target to hit that was stuck.
Yeah.
Very clearly.
Yeah.
So we know what we have done. The Pakistan Air Force knows what we struck. Their establishment that needs to know knows. So there is no doubt. You can forget about what they are saying on media or what the information war or what they want to convey to the public. But what we did is known to us and to them very clearly.
Yeah.
That is the primary issue, and that is the real message, that you cannot use your territory to orchestrate attacks against us, and that stands. Whether we can have a better film or a better picture that can give a proof, firstly, within our own borders, once the Air Force says we struck, that is proof enough. Mm-hmm. That is point one. Second is, yes, at times it is better to have some element of video or photos that can be released. We cannot declassify a mission straight away. But it is good to have some capability that we can get images that can be released, and that can control the narrative, that can explain the narrative even better. Especially when there are dissenting voices. Yeah. So that is again a takeaway, and we have looked at it.
Yeah. Do we have that now in place whereby we could fight that information war more effectively with video and whatever else it is, if something like Balakot were to happen today?
It was in place even that time. It's not that it wasn't planned to get a damage assessment immediately, but because of the challenging conditions and the weather and so many aspects that I don't want to go into, since we have not declassified the mission. Once the mission get declassified, these things get known. But we have taken our action that we will need to back up these issues. If the satellite picture had come immediately the next day, we would have been even better off. Yeah. But the weather was not clear even then. Yeah. So we have taken some actions. Yeah. We have the capability, and we will do it differently.
What I found really interesting about Balakot and the day after, when they counterattacked, but we hit back and we launched, was that Pakistan's threat was that, look, we are a nuclear power, and therefore India would not dare use air power. But between not using air power and the nuclear threshold, there is a big strategic gap which the IF exploited. That was a gutsy move, a lot of people would say. Could you tell us a little bit more about your view of the gap that resides for conventional air warfare?
That was a really gutsy move on all fronts. At the national front, for understanding this, at the government level, for taking this decision and utilizing the air power because of the target that was selected. And Air Force was best suited to address this kind of target. And it was this decision was taken. And of course, we delivered, we achieved the mission. So in terms of handling this gap, like you said, the strategic gap that exists, this needs to be exploited. And we have to analyze our threat scenario in the subcon regime very carefully. A lot of things have happened over the last 1 year, and we really have to give this kind of threat analysis a close look and develop capabilities to be able to handle it. And of course, there is a strategic gap in which air power can be utilized. It is not always that the escalation will go out of control, like was demonstrated. We de-escalated, and the fact is that even Pakistan Air Force, their actions taken thereafter, there was an element of escalation control even from their side.
Yes.
Even from their side. So that's a clear understanding.
Yeah.
There is a strategic gap that can be exploited, that must be exploited, and we need to build our capability to be able to do it.
Yeah. And you believe, sir, that if you are called upon for a mission, a ground attack mission in Pakistan, whether it's terror or something else, based on the experience, you are well suited to carry out that mission, and that you can do it whenever you're called upon?
Yes, of course. We were well suited then, and we are better suited now, because having undertaken that and looking at this subcon scenario and the kind of missions that may come up, that can come up, we have taken steps in terms of inducting some kind of weapons or some kind of capability, be it in communication, sensors, and that will be even more useful.
Yeah. And so, since you became chief, one of the things that you have looked at, and in fact Air Chief Marshal Bhadauria also looked at, was extended range, beyond visual range air-to-air missiles. The fact that Pakistan was firing AMRAAM missiles, from far within their side, and that we may have been outranged on that day, or certainly outpositioned in certain scenarios. How is this a priority for yours in terms of addressing?
Oh, it's a very high priority.
Not just with the Rafale, but with other platforms.
No, it's you've pointed out correctly, it's a very, very high priority. And apart from Rafale, which of course will mitigate this gap very well, we will have much better missile. We had progressed indigenous solution at a very rapid pace, especially after this activity. And you are aware Astra missile trials are over, and that gives us parity. Yeah. So that is an area that we have really focused, and we have moved fast to integrate on our Su-30s, and we'll have this capability already.
Yeah. So there were mistakes which were also made on the 27th. There was a very sad fratricide incident which took place. What are the lessons learnt in that?
Yeah, fratricide, that was a tragic mistake, and we have finished the inquiry, and all Air Force inquiries, I can tell you, we do it very dispassionately and very professionally. We know exactly what has gone wrong. There were no systemic issues, but there were, of course, errors made in terms of violations of the procedures, SOPs, and we have established that. So we have taken disciplinary action in terms of where it was required. We have instituted measures and put things in place so that such a recurrence doesn't happen.
So that's interesting, sir. The procedures which you already had, you believe that they were all right. It was that they were not followed in the way that they should have, that resulted in this mistake. There wasn't a procedural mistake in that chain of command.
No, it wasn't that there were procedures that were missing. It was the execution part that went wrong, and some basic, some tragic mistakes were made in following that procedure. So that's how this mistake happened, and fratricide happened.
Yeah.
And that is why the disciplinary action that we have taken. We have taken some very strong actions, and that was called because we have lost officers and men, and that such a mistake should not happen.
Sure. Air Chief, the future of the Indian Air Force resides in missiles and radar technology as much as it does in fighter jets and fighter pilots. There's the acquisition of the S-400. There is the potential acquisition of the NASAM system at a very different level from the United States. And there has been a lot of progress in indigenous radar development. How does this enhance the power and the capability of the IAF going forward?
In terms of our air defense capability, it hugely enhances. You mentioned indigenous radars, and I must tell you, the status of our indigenous radar, the level of R&D, and the success of R&D in this phase is huge. So in our integrated air defense network, we are just inducting all indigenous radars from now. In terms of S-400, in terms of AD capability, it will again be a game changer, mainly because of its capability and the options that it will give us. In terms of overall growth in this area, as we go into the future, I see a lot of indigenous development which needs to be integrated both at the sensor level and for the hard kill options into our network.
Yeah.
And this is an area which will keep improving.
Yeah. One or two more questions, sir. The 114 aircraft deal seen very much to be the future of the IAF in terms of building up numbers in addition to the LCA. And yet there are, let's face it, budgetary constraints across the services. Capital expenditure budgets are low. How are you going to deal with this situation, sir, going forward?
No, there are budgetary constraints, but any such acquisition also has a very long time frame. So we are going to sign the 83 LCA soon.
Yeah.
That will start, and the 114 fighter program that you mentioned is at RFI stage, and thereafter we are at the stage of analysis post RFI, and very soon we will initiate it with the government. And once that is done, it will take a while by the time we come to contract stage. And therefore, as far as budgetary constraints are concerned, we have to spread it over a number of years. Mm-hmm. So that is the way we have planned it. That's the way it will pan out. Also, the budgetary constraint is affecting us more now because of our committed liabilities.
Yeah.
And that's happened because of some of the contracts we've signed in the recent years.
Right.
And that committed liability will start to draw down in a couple of years.
Right.
So it will all kind of match up. And that's an exercise we do in planning.
Right. The Rafale deal, I mean, it's very close to your heart because it's not just a capability, but it's a process which you were part of, the entire negotiations, the problems which you encountered, the guarantees which you sought and which you finally did get. You must be a relieved man that you are chief at a time in just a few months these planes will finally be coming online.
Yeah, you can say that, and I'm looking forward to Rafale reaching our Indian skies and inducting into the Air Force, so to say, and integrating with the other aircraft that we have. And in June, you'll find me in Ambala flying the Rafale.
I have no doubt. One final question, sir. You would have seen the Supreme Court order as far as the Army is concerned and women and the possible path of progress in the Army for them. The Air Force has been a real leader in this regard. You've got women fighter pilots. Tell us about the experience of the IAF in taking the lead in inducting women into different fields, even fighting arms like as fighter pilots.
Yeah, you rightly said we have inducted women in the fighter squadrons. We have a woman pilot who is already a flight commander in a helicopter squadron.
Yes.
We have women officers in the transport fleet, and they are doing well. The assessment in Air Force is totally capability based, totally merit based, and as and when they come up professionally to positions where they would come up, since you mentioned to the Supreme Court orders and positions of command, etc., I think that is where your concern is. I must tell you that when they come up to that stage and they are capable and merit-wise well placed, they will reach those positions. I have no doubt.
All right, Air Chief, it's always a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you very much indeed. Air Chief Marshal Bhadauria over there speaking a lot also about the future of how he sees the Indian Air Force, some of the acquisitions coming in, the lessons learned from Balakot, and several other key aspects, technology development as well. Well, there you have it, the Chief of Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal Bhadauria, talking about the Balakot operation, what happened a day after when the Pakistani Air Force retaliated and India had to take them on. The message is quite clear. If these opportunities or if an order comes in the future, the Indian Air Force will be ready.